welcome to the Art of Being Human. Last segment we started a whole new section on the development of the human being from infancy through death, actually from conception through death, because of all of the things that happen. And as I explained before, every developmental phase of the human being, no matter what the age, we're always in one or the other kind of developmental crisis. If we solve the problems that our developmental journey has us on, then we will, by the time we get to be elderly, feel pretty much at peace. If we don't, then the problems that we have not been able to solve for one reason or another come up to haunt us. Now, I started talking to you about preparation for pregnancy and how you might feel, and the fact that you might feel kind of apprehensive, some confused feelings, some positive, some negative feelings about being pregnant. And I mentioned to you that it's very, very normal to feel that way. And if you do feel that way, you're in good company, because most people do feel that way when they're pregnant. Although it's a joyous thing to have a baby, you still have to go through all of the hormonal changes as the child grows. And there's lots and lots of hormonal changes and lots of different changes in your body, because remember, for 9 months, you are the baby's home. And this is what happens to you. All kinds of hormonal changes happen. So it's normal to have the mixed feelings. And once you understand that this is normal and you don't feel guilty about it, because you don't have to feel guilty, you're going to love your baby just as much. And if you have a problem with depression, postpartum depression, we'll get along into that when we get there, then there's medication and there's relief for that. I know one of my good friends had postpartum depression after her children were born, and she couldn't understand why she was so depressed, because she loved them, she wanted to take care of them, and for her, the doctor gave her some hormone shots. And 2 or 3 shots later, she was fine. She got over it and she had no more problem. But it is a problem for some women. So if you have unusual feelings and unusual things going on in your mind, then you need to report that to your doctor, and they can help you with that. You may need some kind of medication on a temporary basis. You can become diabetic during pregnancy. You can have high blood pressure during pregnancy. There's lots of things that can happen to you during pregnancy, but your doctor can help you. And you can usually, what happens, even though there are some babies that are born with problems and they have some deformities or this or that or the other, most babies are born pretty healthy. And most mothers return to health soon after they give birth. So you need to drop the idea of feeling guilty if you don't feel joyous all the time. That's perfectly normal. And once you can get rid of that guilt, then you'll start to wonder what your child is going to be like. You don't know maybe yet whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. Or maybe you're going to have twins. I'm a twin myself. I'm very happy to be a twin. I've had a very close relationship with my sister. And my mother, this was unusual, and I only mention this because it is unusual. My mother had 2 sets of twins. Myself and my twin sister, we're fraternal twins. And then shortly after that, maybe 3 or 4 years after that, she had a set of identical twins, and the doctor said she would never be able to tell them apart. Unfortunately, they were stillborn. They didn't make it. So it is possible to have twins, triplets, quads, and so forth, and not do it by taking hormones or some kind of treatment to make your body produce more eggs than normal. So when you get to a certain point, your focus is now on the child. What's the child going to be like? Will it be a boy or a girl? What kind of things will this child do? But you can't try to force your child to be who you want it to be. Once the baby is born, there might be a tendency of some parents to try to mold that child into what the parent wants it to be. That can be a mistake. I know a person who was my piano teacher when I first started taking piano lessons, and his parent, his mother, and she admitted to doing this, she wanted him to be an artist. She thought every family should have a concert pianist or some kind of an artist in their family. So she got on to him and she started giving him piano lessons early in life. And he practiced and practiced and spent hours practicing, and they built him a studio and he had a grand piano. The problem is he really wasn't into music that much. He did it because his parents molded him, but he was unhappy. He was unhappy because what he loved was mathematics and science, and he was a brilliant person. When he got a chance to teach mathematics and science, he was just over the moon with joy. He just loved it. But he didn't do it as a career. Piano was his career, and I knew that he just wasn't into it that much. But he did it because his parents molded him. He would have been probably much happier as a person just to do what his body wanted him to do, to follow what he had a natural inclination for, and to do everything else on the side. So you have to be careful. You do have to guide your child in terms of morals and discipline and learning. But you don't have to force them to be an engineer if they want to be a musician, or to be a musician if they want to be an engineer. You can go far too much on that. So don't start setting up an educational program for him when he's 5 days old and expect him to go to Harvard. It may just not be in his best interest to go to Harvard. He may not care. He may not even want to go to college. It's not for everybody. So if you mold a child too much, you take a child away from what their natural individuality is. And that is kind of an awful thing to do to a child. Let them grow and be who they are. Let them grow and find out who they are. That's a part of their growth and development. So you do not want to be in a position where you actually try to live the life of your child or live through your child. Too many parents want to live through their child. You know, one thing I really hate, and that's these beauty contests for 3 and 4-year-olds. They should not, at 3 and 4-year-olds, be considered a candidate for honors in beauty. What's the sense of that? They're not even grown yet. Let them make their own decisions if they want to get into beauty pageants, but don't try to force it, because a child doesn't care. Why does a child care? I heard of a man who was, he was very good in sports, and he was given an opportunity to teach children. And so he took a group of 4 and 5-year-olds, and he was so angry all the time because they just did not understand that they had to be a success and they had to win. Well, what 4-year-old cares about that? They play to have fun. They play to grow. And when they play, they learn physical skills and balance and all kinds of things that are important. But they're not interested in necessarily winning. That concept hasn't come into their mind yet. So he eventually quit because he couldn't get him to understand that winning was the most important thing of all to him. And I'm saying that's kind of stupid, because what you need to do is let a child play and grow and develop, and they will do that. And when they're interested in getting into competitions, that's okay, at the age that they want to do it. But it's not going to be good for them to try to do it way too soon before they even have any kind of an understanding as to what that means and what they want. So it's not unusual to go through and get yourself involved in your child in a way that is too conforming to what you think they want them to be. Most babies are born normally, and it's best when you're going through pregnancy not to listen to everybody's horror stories. You know, everybody has a horror story. Well, I did this and this happened and that happened. And the other thing that you don't want to do is listen to everybody's tales about how you can determine the sex of your child. If you hold the string with a disc and it turns to the right, it's a girl. If it turns to the left, it's a boy. There's all kinds of false things out there, and you're probably better off just to leave the drama alone and just enjoy your pregnancy as much as you can, because a lot of information that you hear is not going to be accurate, it's not going to be true, and it's not going to prove anything one way or the other. So most of the stories that you're going to hear are not going to be true. Now, you may be very tired sometimes, and you may have a lot of energy at other times. Don't be surprised at the changes that your body goes through, how you feel, very good one day, very sad the next day. It's all a part of the hormonal thing that happens when you have a baby. And so there are a lot of hormonal changes, and they're going to affect the way that you feel. If you are afraid, you're not weak. If you're afraid of pregnancy, if you're afraid of pain, if you're afraid of all kinds of things that happen, it doesn't make you a weak person. It will help you to get as knowledgeable as you can on pregnancy and what happens. But to do that, you don't need to rely upon other people's talking to you and telling you their stories, which may be traumatic for you to even listen to. So get as knowledgeable as you can. Pregnancy is not for the faint-hearted. There are a lot of changes. There's a whole human being growing inside of yourself, maybe 2 or 3 if you're fortunate enough to have twins or triplets. But if you know, you just have to take it and throw some information out, like too much salt, get rid of it. You need professionals that are going to be medically trained, that are going to help you to understand exactly what you're going through, why you're going through it, why it's normal to go through it, and just kind of ride it out, because you are the housing unit for your developing baby. A child needs both a mother and a father to rely on. And it's true, or so I've read, that if fathers attend the birth of their babies, they're much more involved in the baby's life, and they understand much more how important fatherhood is than if they're not there at the birth of their babies. I know my mother told me that my father was not there when her babies were born, that she said he couldn't get me to the hospital fast enough. That's what she told me. And so I can imagine that that's true of many men. Your wife is in labor, she's now experiencing some pain, get her to the hospital quick, But the fathers need to be there if they can be, and they need to be there to support the mom. The fathers also need to go to birthing classes. If the mother's going to birthing classes, Lamaze or whatever she chooses, it's important for the father to be there too, because he has much more of a sense of committal to this baby, and he has more of a sense of being supportive of his wife as she goes through labor. And there's always ways of managing pain when you're in labor. It doesn't always have to be excruciating if you have shots and so forth to manage the pain. But he needs to be involved in the process. He needs to be involved in how she's feeling and what she's doing. And that gets him much more involved with the baby's development, and they're much more committed, and they help with the child as they're growing up. So they become much more committed fathers. The other thing that I want to tell you, and this is important, if you have an older child, now older, I'm saying older, I'm thinking in terms of toddlerhood, maybe 3, 4 years old when the next baby comes. Usually children are born like maybe 2 years apart. So you have one child, and the child is about 2 years old, maybe 3 or 4 years old when the next baby comes. And you need to prepare the older child, excuse me, for the older child for the younger child. So how do you do that? Well, there are various ways. Excuse me a moment. There are various ways of doing that. You need to help the child to understand that they're still loved, that the new baby is not going to replace them. A problem with the older child is that sometimes they're going to feel, if you don't handle it right, they're going to feel that you have another baby coming because they were not good enough as your baby for you to be satisfied with them. Now, I know this sounds odd, but it does happen. Remember, a person's brain is not developed until they're about 25 years old. And so what happens is that a child that is that young, 4 and 5 years old, is concerned about the newer baby replacing them. They're not the baby anymore. And so therefore they may feel like they failed. They have failed as your child, and so therefore another child will replace them. They aren't going to tell you that because, one, they may be too young to verbalize it. It may be their feelings, but they're not able to verbalize it. And the other thing is they feel guilty themselves. Aren't they supposed to love their new brother or sister? Well, only if they feel that they're included and they're still important and they haven't lost your love and they're important. If you do all the child care and the other child, older child, feels left out, they feel disappointed, they feel like they've been abandoned. So it's very important if you have an older child to make sure the child is involved. The way to do that is have them do little things for you as you have taking care of the baby. They can get you something or they can do something, and so therefore they feel like they're included. I've read also, I can't vouch for this, but I've read also that the older child should meet the new baby as soon as possible, even going to the hospital to see the new baby. The fact is that if they see the baby very soon after it's born, if that can be arranged, I know sometimes it can't, but if that can be arranged, they feel more included. They're a part of it. And if they feel like they're a part of it and they're included, then they are apt to make the transition to being big brother and big sister in a much easier way. And then if you just give them a little responsibility up to what they can handle without pushing too hard, then they will just love the baby. They're helping to take care of it. The baby's important. And in the end, they will get to love the baby. You have to recognize that if they don't like the baby because the baby is taking their place, they're not necessarily going to tell you that's how they feel. So you have to make some assumptions based upon behavior. And you may have to say to them, it's okay if you don't love this baby yet, but you can't hurt the baby. You can't touch the baby and hurt them. Because I know some children will try to hurt the younger brother or sister so that they'll be the principal child again. So there's all kinds of things that happen to a young child when there's a new baby on the way, and you have to handle it. If you handle the psychodynamics right, make them feel included, make them feel important, you're really helping me and all of this, then they'll be all right with it. And then they'll get close to the baby, and then they'll love the baby too. It's important that you don't let jealousy take over or any kind of negative emotion take over an older child when the true child is coming in. So that's a very, very big issue. The other thing is that you may have to do some explaining, because if you have a girl child and then you have a male baby, there's a change in anatomy. And they may need some explanations as to why the little brother doesn't look like the little sister in all respects. They'll have questions about that. That needs to be handled too. So it's just important that there is a smooth transition between the older child and the younger baby. So this is something that you have to realize. Don't push too hard for an older child to be the big sister or the big brother. Don't push too hard, but do push a little bit so that they will feel like they're being included. And begin to prepare your older child for the fact that another one will come as soon as the pregnancy has been confirmed, so that they aren't hit by surprise. Mommy has a bigger belly, how come? If they can understand, you need to understand what their questions are. You need to make it easy for them to ask questions. You need to answer the questions honestly, but to the level of their own understanding. They don't need a biology lecture when they're 3, but they do need a normal explanation that they can understand. So a child will have questions, and you need to know how to answer the questions. You need to let them know that it's okay to have mixed feelings about new babies coming in, and that they will love the baby as time goes on, and you keep them busy but not too busy. There's a real psychological thing that happens here with the older child being like toward the toddler age or maybe a little beyond the toddler age. and another child coming in. And getting used to the fact that they aren't the only ones, but they're still important. They're important enough that you don't want them to be jealous. You don't want them to hate a new baby. So these are tricky little things that you have to deal with before the baby is born. So I just wanted to give you these couple of segments in terms of what happens in your pregnancy and how normal it is to feel kind of discontent sometimes, and what you have to do to help an older child adjust to the fact that there's going to be another child. There's all of these things that you have to deal with while you're in your body and your baby is growing, and there's all kinds of differences that's happening to you emotionally because of the hormone changes in your system. I'm going to just turn to this chart. I find it fascinating. We'll be going into the development of fetuses and of babies before they're born, but if you won't question the hormonal changes and the growth that occurs in your body because you're experiencing it. But I thought you might like to see this. After conception, 8 weeks after conception, the baby is the size of a grape. Now, grapes are tiny, real tiny, but 8 weeks, they're the size of a grape. In 12 weeks, the baby is going to be the size of a plum. In 16 weeks, the baby is going to be the size of an orange. In 20 weeks, they're going to be the size of a grapefruit. And the 28th week, they're going to be the size of a cantaloupe. And 36 weeks, which would be 9 months, they're going to be the size of a small watermelon. By that time, they're ready to be born. And on this next chart, in terms of their development, 4 weeks, the tissues of the heart are beginning to spasm. The heart is trying to beat. 4 weeks after conception, now, of course, it's got a lot more development to go. But at any rate, 4 weeks after, the tissue of the heart will start spasming. 5 weeks, the brain and the heart and the skeleton is forming. That's 5 weeks after conception. Week 7, the legs and the arms and the hands are beginning to form. Week 11, fingernails are starting to form. Week 13, the baby starts to smile, and the intestines start to form, and the baby at this time is only 3 inches long. So all kinds of changes. The development of the baby is very fast when you consider 8 weeks and it's already grape size, even though that's very tiny, and the heart is trying to spasm, it's trying to beat on a regular basis. So when you consider all of the changes that are going on in your system and what's going on in terms of the development of your child and how you're feeling about that and the hormonal changes, and you're changing in terms of your feelings, happy, sad, whatever, don't consider it as being anything unusual. That happens in pregnancy. So we're going to close it here, and I'm going to start next week and talk to you about the conception itself and then what happens in the body while the baby is starting to develop. So we'll close it here, and we'll continue this next time. And please join me then.